In ArcGIS, the most kind of data we're going to face for map design are vector GIS data. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the different kind of feature classes and the corresponding symbol design choices. The idea of a vector-based map representation says no matter how complex the features are, we can always represent them either as points or lines or polygons. So points are represented as XY coordinates in the geographic coordinate system of the choice, and lines is basically a series of points that make a sequence of connected dots. Polygons is just more than three pieces of line segments joined together to form a closed area. In this case, we talk about different kind of shapes that may require very different design decisions. So let's talk about point features for a while. Usually point features have representation of the shape by the point xy and together with other attributes. So if you opened up the attributes table of a point layer, you're going to see similar things like the table shown here. So we can show the map either by the shape or location itself as a points, or we can actually tell the difference among those shapes by the attributes. Okay, so for example, you could show the points are actually different subtypes of the same type. If our question is about where the events or features occur in the space, we can simply display the point as single symbols convey the location only about that event or features. For the map on the display, we show all the crime accident report that have occurred in the business district. We don't tell the difference among those events and only show the location. Points data often carry attributes that allows us to see different subcategories of the same feature. In this case, it would probably be useful to see or compare the two subcategories in terms of their location and relative clusters. When choosing map symbols for our point data, we should try to follow the industry standard as much as we can. For example, representing different kind of crime incidents, we already have some pre-designed symbols for a variety of crime, and they are available by turning on the crime analysis style, and all the crime types can be found there. So try to use those standard symbols as you can, because those carry some kind of shared meaning across the same industry. Well, the question is, because we have the industry standard, should we follow that industry specific symbols every time we make a map? That's not necessary. For example, if you try to show only schools on your map, it's probably enough to work with just a simple circle or point symbols rather than using the standard symbol for this little flag, which doesn't really bring any benefits. However, if you have several kind of point features that try to contrast or differentiate, then it might be a better idea to use the standard point symbols. When features are crowded in space or overlapping in space, it might be hard for people to perceive the relative concentration or intensity of the activity in space. In this case, the most effective way to convey the spatial distribution is to aggregate those occurrences over particular space unit. For example, the map we see here is the aggregated number of crime count by address. Same address can have many crime reported, and we can calculate a number and show them as graduated symbol. Here we show the numerical count by the size of the circle to convey the idea that a certain larger number of crimes happened in the limited number of addresses. So let's talk about line visualization. We often have to visualize, for example, streets and roads and different kind of water channels and rivers and valleys, etc. These are treated as lines. One difference between lines and points is that lines tend to fill your map more quickly and is more space filling, so that it can quickly overwhelm the viewer. One strategy to reduce that effect is to use lighter color instead of dark color. So some kind of light gray will work well for a street network if they are not very critical in interpreting your features. In many cases, those are in the background. However, for major things, for example, highways, you might want to use a darker color to differentiate those another level in the hierarchy of transportation. Again, you should try to use the industry standard where transportation has been mapped in many years, and the transportation symbol styles are available from ArcGIS. Try to use them when you can. For lines data, such as roads, you have the control of color and width, but in addition, you also have control on the line styles. So here we show the symbol selector for lines. We have different kind of lines, different kind of a dashed line that shows the importance of the kind of features in the hierarchy of transportation system. So try to use those standard symbols as you can to represent highways and local roads or streets, because those will be shared meaning across different audiences. For polygon data, we use not only the boundary of the area but also the fill pattern of the inside internal area, as well as the texture of the filling pattern. So these are among our choice. One quick tip for using symbols for area data is that we should try to avoid using very thick boundary lines, because they can quickly overwhelm your map with all the dark lines. So if your emphasis is on the area or internal area itself, the boundary may not be as important as other things. So as long as the boundary is distinguishable, use light gray to reduce the computation for human visual attention. The choice of filling color or filling pattern for the area is a very important one, because they dominate the visual effects. Although it's very tempting to use a solid color to show the areas in different classes, you may want to consider using texture on black and white more often than other colors, because they can convey your meaning equally well, and also they show well on the printing, especially when you have no color printing cases. So we have mentioned the design of symbols for points, lines, and polygons as if they are different individual themes. However, in your map, you may have many different themes that need to be composed together. In this case, there's also a correlated decision on which layer should be highlighted, which layer should be put in as a background. So we have this concept called graphic hierarchy, which basically emphasizes that you should have a good design of the figure and ground in order to make a map very pleasing and functional. So the themes and features that tend to be more important on the topic should be on the figure. Okay, for example, if we try to visualize crime, definitely the crime should be on the figure of your map, and the street network may be grounds and show the relative location and provide the context for you to interpret those crime instances. So when you try to bring this hierarchy concept into it, there's a lot of things to be considered, and there are strategies to emphasize something that over other things. Here is the example of design for graphical hierarchy. We use very saturated red to emphasize the figure, and we use the light gray to represent the ground figure. Even among those features are in the figure level, you may have different features that you want to attract the human attention more. So the graphical hierarchy also needs to be designed for this figure and ground separately. One way to emphasize visual effect is to add a very heavy black line around the polygon so that it will increase the attractiveness, attention effects of those figures. The other possibility for aerial data is to add a very heavy crosshatch pattern for the polygon, which tend to attract more attention. Here's another example of using graphic hierarchy concept. The map on the left, basically there's no graphical hierarchy. Everything are similar importance. The map on the right shows a more carefully designed graphical hierarchy, and the point seems to be on the figure, and all the other residential or building data are in the ground. There's no heavy boundaries for those buildings' footprints. The color for the filling are light gray. So the concept shows pretty well.